Morning, guys. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you this morning. So it's always a little bit airy-fairy when we follow some of our cohort partners because they are in market, they're actively generating revenue, and we are just formed this year and we're just launching right now with a simple premise. We believe that financial inclusion is a function of inability to access available payments rails. We think that people want to pay around the world. And when we take a look at the global population of about 1/3, and including in the US, there are 20 million people who are unbanked. We think part of the problem is in fact a demand side issue. They don't have access to reasonably cheap rails. One of the key things that we're trying to provide is, in fact, somebody mentioned the three-sided marketplace. It is a challenge to enter the rails system because you've got banks, you've got merchants, and you've got end users. We started with a simple concept that we could provide to end users a very simple interface, but in our belief, in this particular kind of three-sided market, we know we need to partner with the financial institutions to get access to their rails systems or be a partner with them on managing their account ledgers. But we also need to make sure we get in front of the merchants. And our primary goal is reduce the cost, increase the speed, and give higher reliability and security, particularly to merchants, but give also all of the proper reporting requirements to the banks. In rails systems, before we get into the tech, I just want to recap. The key areas that people have found frustrating is that with regards to the older models, the Visa, MasterCard, they don't actually offer real-time settlement and finalization. They do a process called netting, which takes about a day on average. They also have very few customer interfaces. And people are now talking about decentralized finance in very broad terms, and they're looking at blockchain, particularly Ethereum. And that has a number of layer 2, layer 3 solutions, but it also has a primary computing problem, and that's the problem of serialization, from which all of its lagging and its price volatility and cost, that has exploded. And I think that is the primary cause for concern when people think about one major thing every rail system needs, and that's scalability. You have to be able to scale a network exponentially, but at the same time, try to figure out a way that the costs don't grow exponentially. And for that reason, we came up with the notion of a directed acyclic graph. It's not new. This is an old model for computing logic. But what hasn't been done is a way to put it into a transaction layer. We think we can become the new base transacting layer for all of the payments rail systems. And that includes not just merchant payments and direct payments, international remittances, but we also think that based on the simplicity of the logic, we will have an opportunity at some time to be able to manage particularly OTC exchanges. Those are exchanges wherein the banks will provide direct clients all sorts of derivatives. That's the primary growth market long term. But to get there, we need to have a little bit of verity about the product. What makes us different? There are two primary attributes. One is the parallelization of our system. As I mentioned, all blockchain solutions go through a centralized mining point for their finalization. That's the whole suite, the clearing, the settling, the finalization. And they all get to these funnel points. So effectively, blockchain as well as Visa, MasterCard, their existing rail systems, these all operate on a similar batch processing. And if you can kind of imagine, what we're trying to do is rather than having batch processing of payments and transactions, we're trying to make that a continuous flow process between whatever parties to a transaction exist. In other words, right now, I can transact with you, and that gets put into an order flow. We believe that it's possible for me to transact with you, and we arrange the full settlement using the consensus and reliability of the network in a way that we don't have to get into someone else's order flow. This has some challenges. Right now, we're arraying the team and have had a great deal of key technical support, particularly from the Fields Institute for the Advanced Research of Mathematics. There's a few reasons we've had to partner with them. We're also one of the first grantees in their program. We've also partnered with the Cybersecurity Research Labs, headed by one of our key technical advisors, Atefa Mashatan, who is probably the leading cryptologist in Canada. We are Toronto-based. Our goal is to be in the US shortly, particularly on the enterprise front. We have another tactic that we are looking at on the international remittances, and we are looking for partners there as well. And in terms of the actual infrastructure, right now we are just building and completing the network build on what we call the simple logic layer. That's effectively an A for B transaction. Very simple, no complications, peer-to-peer. Where we're going next, though, and why we've gotten a lot of supercomputer and parallel computing expertise is because we want to build a smart contracts compiler, which will enable all of the parallelization that I've discussed with you. We should be able to manage OTC contracts. We should be able to manage global networks for payments and international remittances to scales that Visa and MasterCard can't get to because of the way that they've cobbled together their legacy systems. That's our primary goal. And how we get there? First, we're going to be partnering with the enterprise. We need to make sure that we can get some demonstrations going with regional banks. We want to partner with them to provide their merchants a no device, lowest cost, and highest security payments rail system. No more 3% to Visa and MasterCard. We think we can charge a fraction of that. We'd like to be able to split that with the merchants. The reason that if we can make it available and cheap for merchants, we think that we can drive the adoption at that point, the point of sale. And that's our current goal. So with that, thank you very much. Please see our white paper there. It's got a great deal of the information that I've presented to you today, but in further technical detail. It's also the core piece for our provisional filing. And that's where we're at.
I'll go first here. And Alex, great job again, fitting a ton in a very short period of time. It's not an easy thing to do, so thank you for that. A couple of things. I actually have some background in the payment space and actually did a retail payment system spin out of CheckFree that we turned into a payment startup. So I think one of the things that would have helped me if you said, what is the problem with the current payment system, right? The current rails, because you're saying I'm going to build a new rail, which by the way is a challenge as you're well aware. But start out with the problem with the current rail system that we do is when consumers are paying for transactions, you're paying 3% or you're paying 25, in some cases over 50 cents per transaction, right, to process a payment. And we all know when you get down to the core of what it really costs to process a transaction, the real cost of doing that is pennies, right? It's less than 2 cents. And there's the problem, right? We got a big disconnect. So I think you need to lay that out a little bit more succinctly around here's the problem with the current rail system. And it's been a problem, honestly, for 50 years, right? A lot of people have tried to solve it. And one of the things that I think you need to get into here a little bit is why are there are a lot of solutions out there. You talked about, about blockchain and a lot of different blockchain and smart blockchain contracts and problems with that. But where did you fit in that whole landscape, and why is your solution going to be the one that actually you get folks to adopt, right? The other point here, you're going after Visa, MasterCard, the big payment networks, and that's how in the world are you going to do that? And you kind of let us in at the end a little bit that you're going to focus on regional banks and doing that. And by the way, I think that's not a bad strategy. But how do you get them there, right? And but again, that fundamental problem of we pay too much for transactions, we've got a solution here that can solve that and do it in a way that scales. Because you're dead right. I won't identify which one, but I was on with somebody that processes probably about a quarter of the total transactions in the U.S. And we were trying to connect into their legacy system. And honestly, it was 50 years old and trying to actually connect it. They had this open API system that they were purporting. Let's just say it's not quite as open as they advertised. I'm going to come back to team again because I always do. You have what looked like a phenomenal team. Put that earlier in the presentation, spend a little more time, and I know none of us like talking about ourselves, but talk a little bit more about your role, right? How you got there, why this is something that's passionate for you, and I think that would have been helpful. But again, great job. I also avoid, you put something up there that I'm still kind of working through. Transaction link directed, I can't even pronounce the word you use, graph, and I have absolutely zero idea what that is. But that was one of your slides. So if you're going to put something like that up there for people that aren't as smart as you, like me, you got to explain stuff like that to us. But great job on the presentation.
Those are all great points. It's weaning ourselves off techno jargon is an ongoing process amongst the team.
Alex, so let's start there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to also add, those are two really good points. Definitely, yeah, the problem most of the times that we get this presentation available to people in fintech, they understand a little bit of the intuition around the cost of and the magnitude of the challenge and the existing rail systems. But you're absolutely right, because I think especially at these earlier stages, we've got to make sure for investors who are a little bit more maybe leaning towards the idea and concept, I'll put that problem up front and give a little bit better map. I think that's a really interesting graphic that's kind of evolving in the head right now as to how we fit vis-a-vis all of these other players and actors. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, so Alex, on the technical side of things, pretend you're pitching to someone that knows nothing about the industry. At least Daniel understands it. I probably know enough to be really dangerous, but don't understand it all that much. My personal experience with my startup many years ago, we were a technical sale also. And what I would find is when we pitched, I would look at some people in the audience and they'd be glazing over because we're using jargon that people didn't necessarily understand. So as you start to broaden your pitch, dumb it down a little bit. Yeah, try to eliminate the acronyms. The other two areas that we learned that resonated with our audience was, number one, use cases. So, hey, this is what the challenge customer X had. This is how we solved that problem, specifically with the use of Dandelion, for example. And the other is a demo. Now, it was interesting. You had, as you started your pitch, you had kind of the demo of sending an international payment, which is a pretty simple example. But again, I think what you're providing is the underlying infrastructure. So I'm not sure you can necessarily demo that. But I guess my point being is, if the more you can dumb it down for people that don't understand it at all. I actually went back to my kids and said, let me pitch to my wife and kids that know nothing about my industry. Can they at least kind of get what we were pitching? So keep that in mind. The other thing is that, and people have heard this from me before, I have kind of 8 things that I look for in a pitch. There was a few things that I think were missing in your pitch, and that was, how do you make money? I think I can guess that it's probably taking a cut of the fees, but the competition, where you're different, and just overall traction. You said up front that you're just a year into this, but everybody has some level of traction. Do you have the network built yet? If you can talk more about that, just those 3 things I think would help with your pitch. So I'll stop there. Any thoughts on that feedback?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right on the traction. So we did just form in February this year, and it's been more of a technical mission, which is a problem that I've kind of recognized both with the team as well as in our recent advisory board meeting, because I need to start, now that we've got a tech roadmap that's in place, I need to start thinking about what that product roadmap looks like. We're going to have that international remittances layer ready to go, but we're going to be running headlong into AML things in very short order. So right now, I'm trying to get the team to say, all right, I'm going to just kind of lock you guys a little bit in your silo right now because your roadmap is good and you're executing wonderfully. I need to start and assemble a board with commerciality in mind and top of mind. That's going to be one of the primary drivers for the next, I think, 4 to 6 months for me. To get that kicked off, we are in conversations right now with Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. They're the largest player, at least on our side. We haven't gotten to the full scoping, so it's an ongoing discussion as to where exactly we can fit, and it will continue to be a bit of a challenge, which is why I'm trying to cultivate as many as I can, both in the Charlotte area specifically, and we have a couple of key contacts in Southeast Asia that we're looking at as well, because they also understand the problem, particularly in countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, where they have very high unbanked populations, but they have an incredibly high smartphone coverage, which is one of the most strange disconnects. So we're certainly in those conversations as well. Again, until there's a paid pilot kind of in hand, I'm hesitant to say that we have much traction yet. But I have to figure out how I'm going to sell that and kind of negative it.
Hey, Alex, one thing, I happen to have a partner up in Toronto, and he ran global tech and ops for RBC, so I will connect you later today.
That would be awesome. That would be amazing. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.